This is BBC News, the headlines. The leader of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, told the UN General Assembly this afternoon that Gaza is one of the most horrific events of the 20th or 21st century.
What Israel is carrying out is not merely an aggression. It is a war crime and a crime against humanity.
We'll get reaction to that from the West Bank, and we'll hear this hour from the former head of Mossad, Yossi Cohen, on the war, on Palestinian leadership and the fight for those Israeli hostages. The former French President Nicolas Sarkozy is sentenced to 5 years in jail after being convicted of criminal conspiracy. Sarkozy says he will appeal the decision. Eventually, when the fighting in Gaza is over, there will be a reckoning in Israel over who was responsible for the intelligence failures that led to October 7th. Amid continuing recriminations, some in the intelligence community have resigned or already admitted their errors. The Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has not. The spy agency Mossad does not gather intelligence in the Palestinian territories. That is the role of the domestic intelligence agency Shin Bet. But our next guest, the former head of Mossad, Yossi Cohen, did offer to play a role in Gaza as far back as 2016. He was rebuffed. He's just written a new book, The Sword of Freedom, Israel, Mossad and the Secret War. I asked him about Iran and its nuclear program, about the way the war in Gaza has been fought and where it all went wrong on October 7th.
The first line of defense, which is the intelligence line of defense, eventually collapsed, meaning that we didn't know enough before October 7th. We may knew something, we may knew bits and pieces, but we didn't have the entire puzzle. The entire picture was not completed into one absolute alert that says they are coming on October 7th. And this is something that I can...
Was that a political failing or a security failing?
It was a security failing. I'm not sure it was...
So you accept some responsibility for that, do you?
I was not part of that. I mean, actually, I was not...
But there's a preamble to that, obviously.
It's a preamble of all what we have done. We've tried to eventually create a kind of a live together with the Gazan people. There was a complete and pure split in between Hamas as a terror organization, Islamic Jihad as a terror organization inside Gaza Strip. These that have taken and conquered eventually Gaza from, let's say, proper civilians, and us, the State of Israel, that had been in a way supportive of the Gazan people in order to avoid any humanitarian crisis or Gaza to be collapsing into itself because of these two terror organizations that never led the Palestinian Authority to deal with the Palestinian territories completely, i.e. in Gaza mainly, and the Palestinian people themselves. They were like abandoning all rules, because of Hamas controlling their territory and their lives. And when a terror organization is doing this to you, probably you would need some international aid. And by the way, inside Gaza for many years, not only us, not only Israel, but the USA, all European countries, including the UK, Norwegians, the donors, they were kind of a beautiful organization that were working together to make sure that Gazan people will eventually survive. And we were part of it. We were part of that
You seem
effort.
to be talking in terms as if that was in the past, as if maybe in the future Israel can't reconcile the Palestinians being in Gaza.
I'm not sure about what's going to be the future of Gaza. I think that, with your permission, this is going to be one of the biggest questions that ever will be asked, right now, because the major part would be when our hostages, and it's always with me, the mark, to make sure that we do remember, the absolute need for all hostages to be released from the hands of Hamas. And I believe that when they will be released, from Gaza, the war will be over. I don't think that Israel will stay there or has any plans to stay there for longer.
Interesting. Well, let's pick up on that, because the families that protested at the airport this morning as Mr. Netanyahu left, they say the operation in Gaza City now puts their loved ones further at risk. One would presume that if Mossad knew where these hostages were, then a rescue would already have been mounted. So are the families right? Does this put them more at risk?
I think that when there is a kind of a risk being taken by the government, and I do not calculate the risks that the government is taking now, or the government is calculating now, is the try to straighten this very tough equation into a kind of a logic theme. Because on the one hand, yes, we want all the hostages back. Most of the hostages have been returned to the state of Israel because of negotiations, not because of the war. Some would say it is because of the strength and very strong war that we have conducted in Gaza that have forced Hamas to release the hostages. I can agree to that. Today, I think that we're in a situation that we're not holding this part of the equation, that the hostages deal is not yet there. I'm listening carefully to what you've said, and I'm listening carefully to what the special delegate Witkoff said last night. He said that we're closing, to be a kind of a new hostages deal, what I'm aware of, and
you think if they all come out, then the war must end?
Absolutely.
Because there wouldn't be a political argument in Israel to continue it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I assume that that's going to be the case. I think that when the hostages will be released, that will be the end of the war.
Do you think Israel is safer today than it was on October 7th?
Absolutely, yes. Maybe surprisingly, because this is nothing that we have planned strategically. To attack Hamas and then to attack Hezbollah and then to go all the way against the Syrian army and then to attack in Iran. And I think that all that direction that we've been taking, since October 7th, is something super significant to the future of the Middle East. Because since then we've much less, not completely defeated, but much less terror organizations in our region. Much less Hamas, much less Hezbollah, much less threatening Syrian army. And by the way, revolutionary guards of the Iranians inside Syria, they've left as well with this kind of counter-revolution, and much less Iranian capabilities that are threatening the state of Israel potentially as an existential threat.
There's no disputing that all the proxies you mention are on their knees, but the international sympathy for Israel is at its lowest ebb since 1948.
I can see that, unfortunately.
You've got Prime Minister Netanyahu addressing the General Assembly tomorrow, just a week after an independent commission within the UN alleged that the Israelis were committing genocide. Where does that leave Israel's security in the long term?
I think that this is unfortunate that the state of Israel is being declared that it's conducting genocide. I think this is false and this is wrong. I know that for sure. We are keeping our international laws and rules so tightly. I've been working very tightly with the government of Israel. For some years when I was their national security advisor and then head of the Mossad, I know how difficult it is to conduct operations if there is a collateral damage. I know how tough is it to conduct a war when it is a combination of civilians hosting or being forced by a terror organization to be in their houses, hospital, kindergartens, and
we,
even
the BBC don't know that because we're not there. Do you think the journalists should be allowed in?
Absolutely, yes.
Why are they not?
I don't know. This is not decisions that have been taken. I think that everything that you see, everything that the world see, and in the eyes of the BBC, you have to be impartial. You have to know what is the truth. I think that opening Gaza Strip to journalists could be probably the right thing to do, and not only in the eyes of Israel, because I think they have to know it to see it and to show it in your own proper eyes. The BBC has the reputation, to tell the truth. The BBC has the reputation, to take partially, a part that Israel not always in favor of your broadcast, but that's okay as long as you are there. If you're not there, I think learning from only Gazan people, learning from only the people
just on that thought, I was in Gaza in 2008, and obviously there was deconfliction. The Israelis probably knew where I was, and there was some safety in that. But over 200 journalists have been killed in Gaza. I know you say that it's difficult to conduct a war in such a densely populated area, but why have over 200 journalists been killed?
I don't really know, but I oppose that. I oppose the killing of journalists. I oppose the killing of anyone that is not involved. I oppose dramatically, the killing of civilians. I'm not in favor of all that whatsoever. I oppose that strongly. Okay, I am someone that had fought, his life against enemies, proper enemies, and civilians and journalists are not enemies. Okay, we may not like what they say, but we don't do, intentionally killing them, right? This is not the right thing to do. I think that when you enter a war zone, this is part of the risk that you may be taking. I know that journalists are being killed all over the world, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and all over. It's kind of a risky job when you go there. And thank you very much for taking the opportunity to go to see properly Gaza Strip in your own eyes. And you'd been there after Hamas has been taking over. And you saw, how much fear and anger there is on the street against Hamas. They won't let them live their lives correctly, something that we've tried to do with them, with the Gazan people, not with Hamas, of course. So, the unfortunate killing of these that are not connected And of course, journalists, I oppose that absolutely and dramatically.
I've got to ask you about Iran because you played such a significant role in the operation to defeat the nuclear program. I mean, you were leading Mossad during that groundbreaking operation to extract the nuclear archive in 2018. And the big question we all want answered is where that program is now. The IAEA have not been allowed back in. Trump says it's completely destroyed. Do you think it is?
I think it is significantly destroyed. And
to the point where they couldn't rebuild it?
It will be very hard to rebuild it. It would take them, I believe, in between lots of months and maybe some years to rebuild what they've done. And there's something much more significant. To my understanding now, Iran cannot enrich. In these two very known bunkers, Fordo and Kashan, there were enrichment facilities in where they were building the fissile materials towards the bomb. We have claimed all the time that this is something to serve a future bomb that for the State of Israel represent a kind of a existential threat. We didn't want to have that. We can't have it. And now I believe that the enrichment facilities both are shut down and the Iranians could not really enrich. From now on, and this is something very important that happened, Iran always believed that they are immune, that we will not do that. And even voices inside Israel claim that it's not the right thing to attack Iran and that America will never follow. Proven to be the opposite. And I think that President Trump have shown kind of a leadership when he said, I give negotiations 60 days time to reach an agreement. If this is not happening, we will attack. Israel would lead the attack. And that's exactly what has happened.
Do you think the snapback sanctions would prevent it from being rebuilt? Or would
I hope. I know that the only thing that speaks to the Iranian, is a kind of an attack. I don't think that they have ever reversed their agenda because of sanctions.
I've just got a final question for you. There is a plan that we will discuss over the next few days for Gaza, and obviously there is a focus this afternoon on leadership of the Palestinians, given that Mr. Abbas is speaking to the Assembly. There's another man, Marwan Barghouti, who I'm sure you know very well. And
I know of him. We've never met.
You've never met, but I'm sure Mossad knows everything about him. Is he the sort of Palestinian that the security services could accept?
Absolutely not. He's a mass killer. He's an archi-terrorist. I mean, I don't think that this kind of a guy, could lead, any kind of a peace treaty and prosperity for the Palestinians.
So, in his absence, who would it be?
I don't know yet. I think that you've raised a very important fundamental question, which is who is going to lead the Palestinians for their future? And by the way, in between themselves, they are in a pure split. The people in Gaza are led by Hamas. Hamas does not recognize the existence of the State of Israel. For us, maybe Israelis and partially Palestinians, there is a future for something that we call reconciliation, a Palestinian Authority, something that will eventually be sometime in the future kind of an agreement between us and the Palestinians. For Hamas, it's not the case. For them, there is one state, which is a Palestinian state from the river to the sea. This is what they claim. And I think that before speaking about Palestinian leadership from within, they have to reconcile it in between themselves, so to create a kind of a leadership that the world could recognize and speak to.
The book is titled The Sword of Freedom, Israel, Mossad and the Secret War. Former Mossad chief Yossi Cohen, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, a man that spent 42 years in the intelligence structure in Israel, a book that certainly will be an interesting read. Interesting his comments on Marwan Barghouti. We're about to hear some reaction from Ramallah to Mahmoud Abbas's speech this afternoon, and we will hear from a distant cousin of Marwan Barghouti. Mustafa Barghouti is with us and will join us very shortly. We'll take a short break. You're watching BBC News. Welcome back. I promised you that we were going to Ramallah to get some reaction to Mahmoud Abbas's speech to the General Assembly this afternoon. In fact, we're going to go further afield than that, to Johannesburg, to speak to Mustafa Barghouti, the leader of and co-founder of the Palestinian National Initiative. It's nice to see you, sir. Thank you for being with us. You're further afield than I thought. You're on international manoeuvres.
Yes, we are working very hard to alleviate the suffering of our people.
Well, it's good to have you with us. Let's talk about the Palestinian Authority. You might have heard Yossi Cohen just before you came on talking about the crisis within Palestinian leadership. We should be pretty blunt about it. An 89-year-old man, Mahmoud Abbas, he's not the future, is he?
Well, I think he spoke about elections, and the problem we have internally is specifically due to lack of democratic elections for 20 years. And the way out of this is to have free democratic elections where Palestinians and not Israelis will choose our leaders. The Palestinians have the right to choose their leaders, as Israelis do, as the Americans do, as British people do. I don't know why Israel is the one who should appoint for us or decide for us who should be the Palestinian leader. But the solution to the Palestinian internal crisis has been and is the democratic transformation where people will be allowed to choose their leaders freely and democratically.
I thought that was one of the most important points he made in his speech, the legitimacy in his eyes of the PLO, and through that, the Palestinian Authority. Only through the Palestinian Authority, he says, can order be restored in Gaza. The question, of course, is whether the people in Gaza who ejected Fatah and the Palestinian Authority would accept them.
I think we have a very good agreement that was signed in Beijing and about more than a year ago, in July last year. And that gave a very good scenario for the solution, not only of internal Palestinian problems, but also for the future of Gaza. In that agreement, Hamas told us they don't want to be in the government, they don't want to be the government. And there would be, according to the agreement, a national consensus, independent transitional government. That would be maintaining the unity of West Bank and Gaza, making sure that the Israeli army gets out of Gaza, stops, of course, the genocidal war that is happening there. And then that particular transitional government would prepare for elections. Elections for the presidential elections, parliamentary elections. The president mentioned them, but up till now he didn't issue a decree to hold them. The decree he has issued is about having elections only for the Palestinian National Council of the PLO.
Do you think
what we need is a clearer one?
Do you think he is ready to relinquish power?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you should ask him this question. But for 20 years, we did not have elections. As you know, I ran against him in 2005. And we were hoping we will have other elections. But unfortunately, for the last 20 years, we didn't have any. And the problem is that we don't have a parliament now. We don't have a legislative body. We don't have an independent judiciary body. So Palestinians need all of that to have proper unity and to have proper internal democracy. And that's what we are aiming for. But meanwhile, as you have seen, even President Abbas, although he didn't speak about that in his speech, is boycotted by not only Israel, but now even the United States is subjecting him to punishment by denying us, the Palestinians, the right to have our delegation reach New York and attend the General Assembly.
But that, as you know, is because there is no trust in his leadership. The Palestinian Authority is corrupted, it is starved of funding. As you say, you just outlined some of his shortcomings in putting the Palestinians in the right direction. You will have heard me refer in the interview with Yossi Cohen to your distant cousin, Marwan Barghouti, who many people have dubbed the Palestinian Mandela, the man who could lead the Palestinians. Do you think he could, and would he ever be acceptable to the international community?
If he is democratically elected, of course.
Is there anyone else that you can see besides him?
Well, there are so many Palestinian leaders that can do and play a very important role. The problem with the Israeli side, by the way, they didn't deny Abbas the visa to the United States because of what you described. They denied him the visa because of international recognition of the Palestinian state. It's an act of punishment. But going back to your question, I think Palestinians have so many leaders that are capable, so many leaders who can really build a very good Palestinian state. But the problem with the Israelis is that they don't accept any of us. They don't accept Marwan, they don't accept Abbas, they don't accept me, they don't accept anybody, because they want to run the area themselves, because their goal is the annexation of the Palestinian territory. And their goal remains, as you see now in Gaza City, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. At this moment, while we speak, a horrible genocide is happening inside Gaza City, and 1.1 million Palestinians are forced to leave the city, which is being destroyed completely. This wonderful historical place on this land, which existed for thousands of years, is being destroyed. For what? For what? For destroying the future of peace, for destroying the future not only of Palestinians, but also of Israelis?
There is a new 21-point plan on the table, which was presented by the Americans on Tuesday. I don't know if you know anything about that plan, whether it addresses the territorial disputes you've just spoken of, but you must be at least relieved to hear Donald Trump ruling out the annexation of the West Bank.
I don't believe, unfortunately, I don't have the ability to believe neither Mr. Trump or Mr. Witkoff. Each time they spoke about a breakthrough, we've seen another Israeli attack. Each time they spoke about a solution, we ended up having an escalation from the Israeli side. We know, and you know very well, that Mr. Trump has the ability to restrain Netanyahu in 1 hour. He can stop this whole thing in 1 hour if he wants to. But up till now, he's allowing a genocide to continue. He's allowing collective punishment against the Palestinian people, including starvation of people in Gaza. And he's allowing the worst humanitarian man-made disaster ever in modern history. In addition to that, he is not saying anything about stopping the ethnic cleansing. People keep talking about Riviera. What Riviera in Gaza? That means evicting everybody from Gaza. The United States have a great responsibility, because without its support, Netanyahu and his extreme government, his fascist ministers, would not have been able to do what they are doing, not only to Gaza, but also to the West Bank, by the way, where we are
But just to be clear,
and terrorist attacks.
Yeah, but just to be clear, Yossi Cohen just made this point that Hamas also has the power to bring this to an end tomorrow, were they to release all the hostages.
And they are ready. They are ready to
they're
release
not.
all
That's
the
not
Israeli...
the plan they've put forward. They have talked about the partial release, groups of hostages coming out. All of them, all in one go?
I know. You want me to tell you what I know? I know they are ready to release all the Israeli prisoners without exception. All of them, and the bodies
in one
of
go.
Those who were killed. In one day, in exchange of stopping the war. But that's what Israel doesn't want to do. They want to take back all the Israeli prisoners and continue the war, continue the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. That is the reality.
Mustafa Barghouti, always good to get your thoughts. Thank you for coming on the programme from Johannesburg. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a line of breaking news to bring you while we were talking to Mustafa Barghouti. JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, say some of their IT systems have been brought back online as part of what it calls a controlled phase restart. You'll be aware that nothing's been coming off the manufacturing line since August 30th, and there is a real crisis at the moment for those companies within its supply chain. Some relief in the last hour with news that the company's computer networks, which were shut down since the start of the month, are being turned back on in a phased restart of its operations. We'll maybe bring you some reaction to that. We're also going to keep an eye at this hour on what is happening at the White House. I can show you some live pictures where President Erdogan of Turkey is due to meet with President Trump in the next hour. Not always been an easy relationship, that one, but clearly President Erdogan thinks he can appeal to a president that likes big trade deals. They are going to talk about supplying the Turks with the latest jets, F-35s, and in return, no doubt, Mr. Trump will be looking for some intelligence about Syria and the role that the Turks currently play in Syria. So plenty to discuss on that. We will take a short break. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
This is BBC News Live from the United Nations in New York. I'm Katrina Perry.
And I'm Christian Fraser here in London.
The leader of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, told the United Nations General Assembly that Gaza is one of the most horrific events of the 20th or 21st century.
What Israel is carrying out is not merely an aggression. It is a war crime and a crime against humanity.
Also this hour, the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy is sentenced to 5 years in jail after being convicted of criminal conspiracy. Sarkozy says he will appeal the decision. Here in the UK, Andy Burnham says he has no intention of abandoning his post as the Mayor of Greater Manchester, amid speculation about a potential leadership bid. And a group of cyber criminals say they have stolen the pictures, names and addresses of around 8,000 children from the nursery chain Kiddo in a cyber attack. Hello, welcome to Verified Live. At 89 years of age, Mahmoud Abbas is the past. He is unlikely to play any meaningful role in whatever does emerge from 2 years of war in Gaza. His Palestinian Authority was long ago corrupted. It is now without funds. It is deeply unpopular, even in the West Bank. Abbas was not able to travel to New York. He was denied a visa by the Americans, and so he was forced to address today the United Nations General Assembly in a pre-recorded speech. But however diminished he is in the eyes of many in the international community, Abbas insisted the PLO was legitimate and the Palestinian Authority the only channel through which order and leadership can be restored. In his statement, Mr. Abbas set out a 9-point plan for transition. He thanked those countries which this week have officially recognised Palestinian statehood, among them the UK and France. He insisted Hamas, the group which currently governs the Gaza Strip, will have no role in any future state-building process. He called for the release of all the hostages, and he called on Israel to abandon its plans for the annexation of Gaza and large parts of the West Bank. So let's get some reaction and go live to our colleague Katrina Perry, who is in New York.
Thanks, Christian. Yes, as you said, Mahmoud Abbas addressing via video link the gathering of world leaders here at the General Assembly. Some key points in addition to that 9-point plan that you outlined there of his transition. He rejected what Hamas did in those attacks on the 7th of October 2023, saying this was not representative of how the Palestinian people feel. It was not done in their name. He absolutely condemned attacks that targeted Israeli civilians and took hostages. He said it wasn't part of their struggle for independence. He said, though, that the Palestinian Authority is ready for governance, but that Hamas would have no part to play in that. He called again for them to disarm, as he did at the special two-state summit here on Monday, saying that he called on them to give their weapons over to the Palestinian Authority and for that to be done under Arab and international supervision. And he said they would play no part in a future process to rebuild Gaza, to join with the West Bank to have a Palestinian state. And he pledged to hold elections within 1 year of a ceasefire. Let's have a little listen to some of what he said.
What Israel is carrying out is not merely an aggression. It is a war crime and a crime against humanity that is both documented and monitored. And it will be recorded in history books and the pages of international conscience as one of the most horrific chapters of humanitarian tragedy in the 20th and 21st centuries. Despite all what our people have suffered, we reject what Hamas carried out on the 7th of October. These actions that targeted Israeli civilians and took them hostages, because these actions do not represent the Palestinian people, nor do they represent their just struggle for freedom and independence. We have affirmed, and we will continue to affirm, that the Gaza Strip is an integral part of the state of Palestine, and that we are ready to bear full responsibility for governance and security there. Hamas will not have a role to play in governance.
Well, earlier we spoke to our correspondent, John Sudworth, who is in Jerusalem, and he told us what the response there has been to Mahmoud Abbas's address here.
No response yet, Katrina, although, if Israel's response to Mahmoud Abbas's earlier speech this week is anything to go by, they will not like what they've heard. Plenty of those messages, as you've been outlining, were clearly intended to be conciliatory. This idea of underlining the fact that he has and the Palestinian Authority have in the past recognized Israel's right to exist. This idea of two states living side by side, this insistence that whatever the future is, Hamas cannot have a role in it. It must be made to disarm. All intended, of course, to make this possibility, to embrace this recognition by the UK, France, and other states of the state of Palestine this week, make it to move from that recognition to a future possibility of its actual realization. But of course, that all runs into the obstacle of the statements from this particular government, Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that a Palestinian state simply will not happen, and celebrating the fact quite publicly that he has done so much to stop that. I think, as Neda was saying there, the interesting thing is, we've got Mr. Netanyahu himself addressing the United Nations General Assembly tomorrow, of course. As these two men, as so often with Israel-Palestine, talk past each other. The real focus, I think, at the moment is on this possibility of this peace deal, this renewed interest from the Americans, optimistic comments from people like Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, saying that he really thinks that something of a breakthrough is possible. And of course, that peace plan to succeed needs the buy-in from Arab states who would apparently be part of a future security situation in Gaza. It needs the buy-in from Muslim countries in the region. And of course, the red line for them would be this idea of a formal annexation, the kind of thing that Israeli ministers, some of the ultra-nationalist members of Mr. Netanyahu's government are now talking quite openly about. And reports from inside the US administration suggest that Mr. Trump has made it clear, unconfirmed reports, made it clear that he will not tolerate that. So the real thing, I think, to watch, Katrina, is whether that's true, and in his face-to-face meetings with Mr. Netanyahu, whether the US president is prepared to do something that few US presidents have done, of course, which is to impose limits on the kind of options and action open to an Israeli prime minister.
John Sudworth there in Jerusalem. Mahmoud Abbas made a huge plea for humanitarian aid. He also said to Israel, stop using starvation as a weapon. Well, let's talk a little bit about the humanitarian situation in Gaza now. I'm joined by Jagan Chapagain. He is the CEO and Secretary General of the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent. Thank you very much for being with us here. What is the situation in terms of your organisation and the aid, the operation that you're able to run in Gaza at the moment?
For us, the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, which is our member operating there since the very beginning, and they have been providing mostly the medical services, emergency medical services, running of the medical clinics and hospitals. And recently they have also set up some pit hospitals because of the movement of the population on the ground. The humanitarian situation, as reported by the Palestinian Red Crescent colleagues on the ground, is beyond catastrophic. There is a huge short supply of food, and of course there was an IPC report declaring famine in part of Gaza. We have seen that reflected also in the doctors and nurses and the volunteers working on the ground, because last 2 years almost they have been operating 24/7, and it's not been possible to rotate the humanitarian workers. They continue to work there, and they have reported that even themselves are not getting enough food to eat, and some of them are feeling weak because they are not getting enough nutrition. And one doctor told us that I'm in a situation that if I eat 2 meals a day, I cannot feed my children. So the food situation is getting more and more desperate. But it's also equally to the availability of clean water, availability of sanitation facilities. Most of the medical facilities are not working in their full capacity, including those run by the Palestinian Red Crescent. And short supply of fuel creates also a huge problem for the operations of the medical equipment. So in summary, it's beyond catastrophic.
I'm conscious it's started to rain very heavily here, so I won't keep you too much longer. Just one last question. You're talking about the humanitarian workers, the doctors and nurses struggling themselves with food. There's a huge security threat to them as well, though, isn't there?
Absolutely.
We've seen so many of your members have been killed or badly injured.
Absolutely. As you know, in 2024 was the deadliest year for the humanitarian workers around the world. Of course, Gaza sort of has more than 50% of the humanitarian workers killed. But beyond, in Sudan, in DRC, even in Ethiopia, in Myanmar. And this year looks like it's going to be worse than last year. And in Gaza, we have lost a number of people already this year, close to 18 of them getting killed. And the worst one was in March when 8 paramedics were killed. So the protection of humanitarian workers has become a single most important issue.
Do you think that some countries are just not obeying the international norms of giving those protections to humanitarian
I think increasingly the erosion on the respect of international norms have been very, very visible. And there is sort of sense of impunity developing. And you know, when there is impunity in one place, it's impunity in every place.
Okay, I don't want you to get any more wet than you already are. Thank you so much for that, Dagan Chapagenbi.
And I think the protection of humanitarian workers is a big issue for us.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us here. We're going to go and seek some shelter because it is truly bucketing down here outside the United Nations at the moment. So for now, back over to you, Christian.
Katrina, go and stay dry. Thank you very much for that. Let me just show you, you might have seen actually on the side of your screen some live pictures from the White House. We are continuing to look out for President Erdogan, who is due to meet with Donald Trump in the next few minutes. We'll take you to that live as and when it happens. But in the meantime, let's take a short break. You're watching BBC News.
You buy low, sell high, jump on that trend, ride the wave. Stop. That's not how investing works. Wealth isn't won in a bet. Luck is not a strategy, and success demands discipline. You're serious about investing, right?
You certain you can dry those pants?
Please.
You 4imprint certain?
Yeah.
Certainty matters. So when you need the right high-quality promotional products, printed perfectly and guaranteed to arrive on time, that's the certainty of 4imprint. Wow your clients, nail your next event, or inspire your team by visiting 4imprint.com.
4imprint, for certain. Rise up this morning, smile with the rising sun.
Sandals Jamaica sale is now on. For the best all-inclusive value in the Caribbean, visit sandals.com or call 1-800-SANDALS.
Welcome back. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, says he was just being honest when he told a newspaper that many Labour MPs had asked him to launch a leadership challenge against Sir Keir Starmer. Mr Burnham said it was up to Labour MPs whether the party needs a change of leader. Let's speak then to BBC Radio 5 Live's Matt Chorley, who has a contact list to die for. He's been texting all the Labour MPs to find out what they make of this. Do they see Andy Burnham as a stalking horse, Matt, or are they quite into this idea of him becoming the next leader?
Hi, Christian. I'm going to say no and no to those two questions. Yeah, I thought I should try and get the mood of Labour MPs before I went on my show on 5 Live this afternoon. I started texting a few of them, and then I started looking through an alphabetical list of MPs, and I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to do them all. It turned out I had 320 of the 399 Labour MPs. So if I didn't message you today, do get in touch. I have to say, and I haven't counted up the full total. It's definitely well over 100, possibly over 200 have replied. Overall, overall, I think it's fair to say that the mood from Labour MPs is the last thing they need to do right now is change leaders. They made so much hay out of the Tories constantly changing leaders and the turmoil and all of that. Lots of them say, look, Andy Burnham does have skills. He's been in the cabinet. He's now done a good job, they say, of running Greater Manchester, and he's got a part to play. But this is the last thing that Keir Starmer needs right now. Lots of them actually privately very critical of Keir Starmer too, and they think that Number 10 needs to change the way it's operating. But, I mean, the bluntest of all the messages, one MP just messaged me saying, I think he needs to shut up talking about Andy Burnham, and lots of them pointing out the enormous numbers of hurdles that he would need to get through to get into the House of Commons to become Prime Minister. There would need to be a by-election, so we'd have to persuade a Labour MP to stand down and give up their seat. One MP said to me there was zero chance of him finding someone to do that. Then he needs to get the NNC that Keir Starmer basically controls, that runs the Labour Party, to choose him as the candidate. Keir Starmer could try and stop him doing that. Then he has to get himself elected, and Reform UK are licking their lips at the prospect of going up against Andy Burnham to thwart him in that. Then he gets to the House of Commons. Then he's got to mount a formal leadership challenge against Keir Starmer and persuade Keir Starmer to stand down. And then he's got to win a leadership contest. Any other Labour MP could throw their hat into the ring. And only then would he cross the threshold to become Prime Minister. And time again, Labour MPs have been WhatsApping me today saying, this is the last thing we need right now. We'd just like Keir Starmer and his team in Number 10 to get a grip.
Yes, and if form is an indicator of future success, Andy Burnham's record ain't that good, is it? Because he's lost twice before in a leadership contest. The thing is, though, there's a bit of deja vu about this, because we've had a former mayor go to a party conference and make a pledge to be the next leader, or at least sort of make noises in that direction, and that was Boris Johnson, and that worked out quite well.
Well, it did for him. I mean, I'll leave others to decide what it was like for the country. I think certainly you can sort of break the groups of MPs I spoke to today into different groups. Some of those who like Andy Burnham and do think he's got a part to play, some of them were around when he was in cabinet before under Tony Blair and then Gordon Brown and then the shadow cabinet, and they'd like to see him back in Westminster. Others who were around in that period say, look, he served under Jeremy Corbyn. He told people to try and get on and make things work with Jeremy Corbyn, while others say we fought Jeremy Corbyn to get the party back from the left, so they're not fans. Others say, well, look, we don't really know him. There's a whole load, as Keir Starmer won so many extra MPs in July last year. They don't really know Andy Burnham. He's this guy who sort of they think belongs to the history of the Blair Brown governments. He's the mayor of Manchester. They think they should be looking forward and not looking back. So there are quite a lot of sort of emerging camps. There aren't very many, though, and this is where this all starts with Andy Burnham giving the interview to The Telegraph, where it's saying he's been asked by Labour MPs to come to London and rescue the party. I'm not sure there are that many of them who actually think he should be riding up Downing Street on a white horse. One MP told me all of these MPs live in Andy Burnham's head.
Well, no doubt you'll be looking out for him at the party conference in Liverpool week. Is it next week? When do you go?
Next week. Yeah, I'll be there. It starts on Sunday. I'm there live.
Yes. Well, if Andy Burnham's watching, Matt Chorley is in the bidding for an interview.
We've asked him. We'd always like to have you on, Andy. Do get in touch. Like all these Labour MPs, get in touch with me. You know, you've got my number.
And if you're not on that list, why are you not on that list? Matt Chorley, thank you very much. Thank you. The former French president, Nicolas Sarkozy, has insisted he is innocent after he was sentenced today to 5 years in prison. He was found guilty of criminal conspiracy in a case linked to his presidential campaign in 2007 and the way he benefited from this idea that they were trying to source millions of euros of illicit funds from the late Libyan dictator Colonel Gaddafi. Whether or not he got the money, that was part of the case. We'll hear about that in a second. But in this complex ruling, a Paris court acquitted him on other charges, including passive corruption and illegal campaign financing. Well, speaking outside the court after the verdict, Mr. Sarkozy protested his innocence and said he will appeal.
Je demande aux Français.
I ask the French people, whether they voted for me or not, whether they supported me or not, to appreciate what has just happened. Hatred truly knows no bounds. I will take my responsibilities, I will comply with the summonses of justice, and if they absolutely want me to sleep in prison, I will sleep in prison, but with my head held high. I am innocent.
Mesdames et messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen, What happened today in this courtroom of the Paris Correctional Court is of extreme gravity for the rule of law and for the trust one can have in the justice system.
It's a complicated one, this. Let's get some thoughts on it from the journalist and broadcaster Christine Ocran, who has previously interviewed Mr. Sarkozy. We should be very clear, and this was teased out in court, there was no money that actually transferred hands, but it seems to me the very conspiracy around seeking that funding was what landed Mr. Sarkozy in trouble.
Yes, indeed, Christian, and in fact, more than in trouble, because it is likely that a former French president will go to jail. He will know on 13th of October when exactly he should be taken to prison. And that is due to a legal quagmire. I don't want to get into the details, but if Sarkozy wants to appeal to that very harsh judgment that was pronounced this morning, 5 years in jail, 100,000 euros fine, and indeed being an accomplice of a conspiracy to get money for his own presidential campaign in 2007, there is a fairly new legal disposition that Marine Le Pen has also suffered from, which calls for actual imprisonment, even if there's an appeal. And so Sarkozy, if he goes into appeal, he cannot argue of his age. He's 70 years old, and in our legal system, for older people, he could be, dispensed of going to jail. Now, that's indeed the dead end that his lawyers are looking into, but it's really a shock in an already very troubled political scene here in Paris.
Well, as you suggest, it's a fraught time in politics. And if you look at those who have appeared in court over the years, so Jacques Chirac, President Sarkozy, Marine Le Pen, does it look to those on the right like it is they who are under attack?
Well, unfortunately, there have also been legal cases against people on the left. I think overall, what is very worrying, and it is true in many of our democracies, is that people don't trust politicians. And it adds to this idea, that all these guys are around just for their own profit. But again, what is really very fascinating about Sarkozy's case is that the jury reckoned that there is no actual proof that there was any Libyan money involved in Sarkozy's presidential campaign in 2007. No proof.
But I've been sort of pondering, Christine, the history today, because I did report from Libya, and of course David Cameron and Nicolas Sarkozy turned up, and really it was Mr. Sarkozy that was at the forefront of the fight to get rid of Gaddafi. Did they discuss why he was so taken by that idea, and did it have anything to do with this case we've been hearing about?
Well, what is obvious, and these people have indeed been charged, is that 3 or 4 of Sarkozy's closest aides and advisors at the time did go to Tripoli and did go and meet with Gaddafi's closest aides, including a man who was suspected of having organized a terrorist attack back in many years before. And so these people are indeed convicted of criminal conspiracy for getting the money. But as far as Sarkozy himself is concerned, there is no proof of actual financing of Libyan money.
Really interesting. Christine Ocran, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. A group of cyber criminals say they have stolen the pictures, names and addresses of around 8,000 children from a nursery chain. The hackers are demanding a ransom from Kiddo, which has 18 sites in the London area, as well as some abroad. The criminals say they have information about the children's parents and carers, as well as other sensitive data, such as safeguarding notes. The story is from Joe Tidy, who is the BBC cyber correspondent. He says it has come as quite a shock.
I've seen a lot of nasty cyber attacks in my time, but this probably is one of the worst. If you go on the Darknet website of this group, you can see they've published lots and lots of information on some innocent kids. If you look on the site, they've got 10 different boxes for 10 different children they've picked from the list, and they've got the pictures, the names, the phone numbers, the email addresses of the parents, the carers. They're threatening to release the safeguarding notes and any notes from parents, things that you really don't want in the public domain, and you don't want cyber criminals to be holding to ransom. But that's exactly what's happening. These criminals have been doing this now for at least, I think they first contacted me about 5 days ago, and I didn't do anything about this because I wanted to see what was going to happen. And then lo and behold, they have carried out their threats and posted about it on the darknet. And now, of course, the hack is very much going public. Kiddo has not said anything about this hack at all publicly, nor to us. We were waiting for them to supply some sort of confirmation statement or some sort of response, but they haven't. But what has happened is that I've spoken to some of the receptions of the nurseries, and they have said they have been contacted about a data breach, but we wait to see whether or not Kiddo responds to this and what they do.
Joe Tidy reporting, and some of the details of that investigation currently on the BBC website. Do have a look at that. We're going to take a short break around the world and across the UK. You're watching BBC News.
Now on BBC News, the latest business news from across the globe. Business Today.
The drug maker Moderna opens a major new facility here in the UK as the country's science minister tells the BBC it will have to pay more for its medicines. The car maker Jaguar Land Rover says it's begun to restart some of its operations after being crippled by a major cyber attack. And job cuts are brewing at Starbucks. The coffee giant is closing cafes in the US and UK as it tries to become a nicer place for its customers. Hello there, welcome to Business Today. I'm Tig Enright. Thanks for joining me. Well, on the day that the pharmaceuticals giant Moderna has opened a major new vaccine manufacturing and research centre here in the UK, there's been a warning from the Science Minister, Lord Valence, that Britain will have to pay more for its drugs to attract more of this kind of investment. Well, the Moderna facility in Oxfordshire bucks a trend of big pharmaceutical companies pausing or cancelling investments here in the UK in recent weeks. Merck and AstraZeneca are among those who've said that Britain's health service isn't paying enough for the medicines that they make. Now, the Science Minister, Lord Patrick Vallance, has told the BBC that higher drug prices are on the way if that exodus is to be stopped. Their investments are also in demand from President Trump, who also wants lower drug prices in the US and is using the threat of tariffs to push manufacturing back to his country. Our business editor, Simon Jack, has been speaking to the UK Science Minister.
There's absolutely day-by-day discussions going on, including with industry, including with the US, to try to come to a solution here that's right for innovation, right for getting companies into the UK, and right for patients in the NHS. And that's what we're working on. I've got no doubt we'll come to some arrangement which gets to the right position on this, because we have to, because it's one of our great industries, one of the great success stories of what the UK can do, and because it's the most relevant thing to actually improving health in the UK.
Is it embarrassing for a government that declares that life sciences is a crown jewel and it wants to be a superpower for some companies to call this country uninvestable?
Well, I don't think people are saying it's uninvestable. I don't
they
think
are saying
well,
that.
They're saying they do not. Well, actually, what they're saying is they do not want to invest at the moment until this commercial environment's fixed. That's a different thing from uninvestable. And if you look at what's happened here, if you look at BioNTech that have put $1 billion into this, if you look at Prologis, who announced $3 billion for the Cambridge Biomedical Science Park, people are investing. We've also got investors coming back to the UK from the US to invest. So there are investable propositions here. The basics are right. We know that people want to invest here. We need to get the commercial environment right. That's what we need to get fixed.
So price increases are inevitable if we're going to fix this, correct?
I think price increases are going to be a necessary part of what we need to do to get to a solution which will benefit patients.
We're pausing the business news now, taking you to Washington, D.C., where Turkey's President Erdogan is arriving at the White House for a meeting with President Trump. You see there the customary handshake on the lawn there. The two will be speaking about trade ties, no doubt. Also worth noting, Turkey is a major player within the NATO alliance. So clearly issues there related to Russia will be on the agenda. Turkey also interested in purchasing some American-built fighter jets. So clearly lots for the two gentlemen to discuss there in Washington, D.C. Both have gone inside there, the White House. Well, let's bring you back to the business news now, talking more about that warning that Britain will need to pay more for its drugs in future. Let's get more context on that by speaking to Dr. Leila Hanbeck, Chief Executive of the Independent Pharmacies Association, which represents small pharmacies here in the UK. Thanks very much for joining us today, Leila. You know, the drug makers are drawing a direct link between the drug prices that people pay, or the NHS pays here in the UK, and their willingness to actually manufacture and research here. But, you know, aren't these completely separate things? things? I mean, some might say the industry is simply trying to bully the UK into paying more.
Well, we've raised this with the government actually a couple of years ago when we had serious issues with medicine shortages, and we were telling the government that because of the UK medicine budget being so low in comparison to other countries in Europe and also in the US, manufacturers can send their medicines elsewhere rather than having them in the UK, which can cause issues for our patients here. So this is something that we've been highlighting previously, not just from an investment perspective, but also from impact on patients' perspective with regards to medicine supply.
Which is perfectly understandable. If the UK is not willing to pay more for its drugs, then it's not going to be a priority for the drug makers. But just on that point about actual manufacturing and research here, they're completely separate matters, aren't they?
Well, they are in a way and they aren't, because at the end of the day, if we have manufacturing here, obviously it makes the supply easier, because right now we are too dependent on manufacturing happening in other countries. And during the pandemic, for example, we saw, if something happened in India or China, it affected our supply here. So I think if we are as a country talking about boosting our life sciences and manufacturing here, but that certainly is a part that we need to invest in. Driving prices down and not investing makes people go away elsewhere, and then we end up having to rely on others for what we need.
Okay, so how much would you expect? How much more would you expect the NHS and other drug buyers here are going to have to pay? I know it's all speculative at this point, but are we talking 10%, 50% more?
I wouldn't want to comment on that, but what we want here is that this country to be a competitive country when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to investment, when it comes to life sciences, but also we don't want our consumers, our patients, to be put in a position where they are not, preferred because others get the preference. We saw what happened, for example, with Mounjaro in August when prices suddenly went up, and it affected UK consumers here. So our job here to ensure that the UK medicine market is functioning properly and our patients get the medicines that they need.
Okay, Dr. Leila Hambeck, Chief Executive of the Independent Pharmacies Association, thank you for joining us. The British car maker Jaguar Land Rover says it's begun a phased restart of its operations with parts of its IT system back up and running. This after a major cyber attack which left the company, owned by the Indian conglomerate Tata, unable to make any cars for much of the last month. The more immediate concern, though, is for those smaller companies that supply Jaguar Land Rover with parts. Here's the UK's finance chief, Rachel Reeves.
We're working very closely with Jaguar Land Rover, but not just with the company, but also with the wider supply chain. The focus is both getting the business back up and running as quickly as possible, but also making sure as a government we're doing everything we can to stand by the company and the wider supply chain.
Well, our business correspondent Theo Leggett is following this story for us. Theo, the government trying to hatch a plan to support these suppliers. But firstly, what can you tell us about this phased restart of operations? How significant is it?
It's small steps. I mean, this is probably the first piece of good news we've had out of Jaguar Land Rover this month. This affair's been going on for more than 3 weeks now. It is a crisis, and this is the first sign of it being resolved, but it is baby steps. So what Jaguar Land Rover's done so far is restarted a system for processing invoices. Now, that's good news for suppliers because it does mean that outstanding invoices can get paid, so there will be a little bit more money coming in from them. It's also managed to restart a system for providing spare parts, both in the UK and to overseas departments, which means that if you have a Jaguar or Land Rover car and you need a spare part, you may be able to get hold of it. And it's also restarting systems that allow wholesale sales of cars, so sales of cars from the company to dealerships, which should ease the sale of a backlog of cars that have already been built through the dealerships onto customers. But again, no cars are being made at the moment. That hasn't changed. The production lines are still stationary and will be stationary until at least the 1st of October, quite possibly well beyond that. So this is the first sign of any progress having been made, but it is a small step.
Rachel Reeves there, not giving away much detail about what the government's plans are to support those suppliers. What more do you know about what's been considered?
Well, we know that the UK government is not keen on a so-called furlough scheme where, for example, companies would be paid to send their workers home while there is no work for them to do, so that they don't have to be laid off or fired, and the expertise can be kept in-house. Now, the government's not particularly keen on that, in part because it is using taxpayers' money to tell people not to work. One of the ideas that has been bandied around is that the government could step in as a parts buyer of last resort, so buy up parts from suppliers and sell them back to Jaguar Land Rover at a later date. Now, that does have some advantages insofar as it's not giving away taxpayers' money, but I've spoken to people within the supply chain and they say it's wholly impractical because this is a lean industry where parts are ordered to be at the right place at the right time on the production line. There is no stockpiling, there's not really much warehousing, so having somebody build up a stockpile and then try and introduce that to the production line, that would be confusing and not really work terribly well.
Theo Leggett, thank you very much. Starbucks has announced a plan to close underperforming and uncomfortable coffee shops in North America and in the UK. It's also making cuts to its back office teams, with 900 jobs there being eliminated. This is all part of a $1 billion restructuring plan, spearheaded by its chief executive, Brian Niccol, who's been trying to make Starbucks more attractive for coffee lovers to relax in again. Well, Erin Delmore is watching the story from New York for us. And Erin, it is those stores that are the least welcoming that are earmarked for closure, isn't that right?
That's right, Ty. You know, when I walk down the street in New York City, something that's become really popular are little Starbucks grab-and-go spaces where you place your order online on the app. You show up, your name is on your coffee cup, you take it, and you walk away. But that's exactly the kind of thing that the new CEO of Starbucks wants to be walking away from with his new restructuring plan. See, the aim is to create a third place, and that's a phrase that's given for a space that people use to hang out in that's not the office and not home. And that's what he means when he says he wants to make the cafes more welcoming and close cafes that they don't think meet that bar. Now, what it means is about 500 physical stores are earmarked for closure within this fiscal year.